Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Ariana Jasmine and today we're going to be reacting to another peers debate. Hopefully this one's better because it has Norm Finkelstein as well as a aid worker that is on the ground in Gaza. So fingers crossed it's not as much as brain rot as we usually get. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment to my YouTube channel and let's get into it.
What right does Israel have to just take over Gaza?
You're not talking today to one of the liberal Jews. You're not talking to a government spokesman.
Clearly.
You're talking to one of the settlers. This is where we're from. This is where we're going to stay. Nothing is going to get us out.
Well, Dr. Mossab Nasser is the CEO of the American medical charity Fleisher Scientific, who is currently working in the European hospital between Khan Yunis and Rafah. And Dr. Nasser joins me now. Thank you very much indeed for taking time from what I know is a very, very busy, pressurized time for you there. Can you just tell me, you've come from the United States, I know. Obviously, when you look at these scenes from afar, they look horrific. What is the reality like on the ground?
Thank you, Piers, for having me. The reality, I would say, is very different from the shots you see on TV. It is a million times worse. And the way I like to describe it to people is like you just had a hurricane. Because I'm from Texas, I can talk about hurricanes. Imagine a hurricane hit a city, and then a major earthquake hit it again, followed by a tsunami. This is the reality on the ground in Gaza. If you visit Khan Yunis, like how we did in the past couple of days, actually we are in Khan Yunis, and between Khan Yunis and Rafah. We went and visited Khan Yunis, and it's just unbelievable.
I just want to make this point as well. Of course, the images that we're seeing are not as reflective of what's actually going on because a lot of the journalists have been killed. The only news station that actually had journalists on the ground, which was Al Jazeera, is banned by Israel. So even when Al Jazeera reports about what's happening inside Israel, they don't have any reporters from inland to report on what's actually going on, which was not the case even a couple months ago. Over 120 journalists have been murdered. And also, even the journalists that weren't murdered, like Motaz, Wa'il Dahdu, Lama Yamus, like all of these journalists that were actually reporting on what's going on the ground, they have all fled. So yeah, of course, the images that we're seeing now are not reflective of what's actually going on the ground because the state that's controlling the area, which is, you know, Israel, is not allowing the true media to come out. When this had first started, we were seeing a lot of what was actually happening on the ground. But we're going on to the 8th month. So of course, we're not going to be getting as much news or as much on the ground coverage of what's actually going on because they've made a systemic approach to stop that from happening.
Unbelievable. While looking at the destroyed buildings, I kept asking myself, how can you create and make such destruction in such a record time? It's just unbelievable.
And in terms of the civilian casualties that you're seeing on a daily basis, what kind of scale are we talking and what kind of injuries?
Everything you can think of. But the thing that's more heartbreaking is not just civilians, it's families. So when we talk about civilians, it can be one person from a different family and one here and one there. But what we've witnessed are entire families wiped out. Just a couple of days ago, we had a family of 7.
I want to talk about why this is happening. So in Gaza, a lot of these families, since they can't expand on the land, they expand going up. So you'll have one building have multiple stories of different generations of a family living there. So when Israel or any entity throws a bomb on a building, you wipe out an entire bloodline because the whole entire bloodline is in that building. Does that make sense? That's because they're forced to live on a tiny strip of land. Exactly, Tweakle. That's why. So when we talk about, okay, this entire bloodline was taken out, it's because the building that the whole entire bloodline lived in was taken out. That's why. It's not like America where your uncle lives in Florida, your aunt lives in Oregon, you know, your mom lives 2 cities over. It's not like that. They don't have land to expand on.
Been brought to the European hospital in Gaza here. That the Fleisher scientific team worked very hard in trying to treat them and resuscitate one of them. 3 of them actually came to the hospital in a state of, I would say 2 were dead, 1 in a state of death, effectively. Our team spent about 45 minutes trying to bring someone back to life and unfortunately failed. One of them came with the head and the entire torso effectively completely crushed. like an 18-wheeler just drove on top of him. Another one came completely dead with the face completely burnt, and the mother was following them screaming. And I asked her, "What's going on? Why? What happened?" She said, "Look, we live east of Khan Yunis, and we heard the bombing happening close to us in Rafah, so we decided to evacuate." Even though she said the area where we live is not considered a red zone, it's not a war zone, relatively safe. She said we decided to leave. We packed our stuff on the back of a car, and I told my son as soon as we were ready, I told him to go upstairs, just make sure that all the doors are locked before we leave the house. And suddenly I see a tank rolling close to the house. I thought it's just, we'll be safe. And she said, by the time my son went down, the tank hit the house and several people were killed. She said, we didn't have cars because there's no gas in Gaza. So they have one car with gas that she could carry the 3-4 bodies with her and bring them to the hospital. 3 of them actually died, and the other 3 were seriously injured. So this is the reality. We've seen burns, we've seen broken bones, we've seen crushed bodies, children with broken skulls. I just cannot describe the horror, honestly, that we have seen so far.
And it's quite likely to get immeasurably worse if there's a full-scale invasion of Rafah. I know that you were in a safe house with many of your team in Rafah, but you had to evacuate. Why was that?
We call it the safe house that's no longer safe. We spent about a week in that house, and then...
Why do you think they just left Rafah? Do you think they wanted to go on a walk? Like, what do you think happened? I feel like he could have just asked so many better questions than that.
And we were operating at the European hospital, kind of business as usual, dealing with the casualties and treating people with acute injuries and so on. But then 1 week into our stay at that house, we heard that the eastern part of Rafah was under evacuation. Our house, fortunately, happened to be in Block 6 in Rafah, and it was not in the area that was required to evacuate. So we thought we are relatively safe. And this house is considered deconflicted. So we are known, our position is known to the Israeli army and to the organizations that we have come with, primarily the WHO. It's a deconflicted house. So we decided to stay, but in the middle of the night, the bombings that took...
If there's anything I've learned from covering these people since like 8 months ago, is that they literally do not care if you're a safe house. They don't care if you're an NGO. They don't care if you're a humanitarian aid worker. They don't care if you're American. They don't care if you're Australian, if you're Palestinian. If they want to kill you, they will. They will indiscriminately kill. And why is that? It's because they are allowed to indiscriminately kill. Nobody will actually hold them accountable by any means. They've been doing this for 8 months, and the Biden administration is still sending them bombs, sending them money by the billions. Yeah, I mean, when you have no repercussions and you're getting money out the wazoo for no fucking reason, of course you're going to continue doing what you've been doing. That's exactly what's happening right now.
Place within less than 500 meters radius was unbelievable. The sound, the shaking of the building, like literally in an unbelievable way, just scared the hell out of it. The level of terror at night was unbearable for any member of my team. I have 12 Americans, 3 Brits, 1 from Egypt and 1 from Oman, and we've all decided collectively that we're not going to spend the time, any nights in this house anymore, even though we did not receive any evacuation orders, and we all basically came to the European hospital, and that's where we're staying since then.
Israel insists that it's getting humanitarian aid through, including medical supplies. What is your experience of that? Are you getting these medical supplies?
Unfortunately not. I can tell you my team at times feels useless. Honestly, I have the best of the best in terms of expertise between surgeons, primary care physicians.
Yeah, so when you go to a hospital, what happens, right? You go to the hospital, you say, okay, X, Y, and Z hurts, this happened. The doctors have to run so many different tests, like what is your white blood count? Are you doing good? Like what are your vitals looking like? Do you have high blood pressure? Do you have low blood pressure? Do you have any other, blaring diseases or illnesses? Okay, they have to send you in for CT scans, MRI MRI scans, maybe even get a couple of x-rays. Okay, now they have all the imaging and the testing back. Okay, now what do we need to do based on all the imaging and the testing? You can have all the expertise and the surgeons that you want. If the surgeons don't have sterile rooms, if they don't have any imaging to look at, if they don't even know what the hell they're dealing with, they can't just cut open people without anesthesia. They've already been amputating children and adults without anesthesia. I mean, amputations are pretty straightforward. You can do an amputation. But when it comes to the more nitty-gritty stuff, like, okay, my hand is broken, my leg is broken, I'm having third-degree burns or etc., you need medical supplies, you need imaging, you need testing. A doctor cannot do their job as a doctor if they don't have all of these things. All they can do is educated guesses. But even if they do that educated guess, where do they find the medicine to actually heal you, right? So you can have the best doctors in the world. It doesn't matter if they don't have the necessary equipment and the facilities that they need. Their hands are seriously tied behind their back.
Physicians, nurses, wound care specialists, but sometimes you have an injury coming to the emergency room, and you look for basic supplies as simple as anesthesia medications. You don't have the blood. You don't have it. Basic wound care supplies. You don't have it. And one thing, Piers, that really struck everybody on the team is that the Palestinians seem to operate at a frequency that's different from the emergency teams in the West. It's basically rationing of resources. Sometimes you have an injury that's coming to the hospital, and they say we can't do anything about it. The way we think, the way in America thinks, like, let's do whatever we can to save their lives, or his or her life. And we've seen this multiple times. We try our best. We basically consume resources. For them, it's a waste because he is dead. Just don't spend time. So this reminds me of COVID time, right? Even though he still has a chance of survival, they decide not to take to work much on him or her because that's a waste of resources. As I said, this reminds me of COVID time when people at the hospitals in America and Europe and around the world were saying, this patient has the right or the chance of survival, so let's put him on or her on a ventilator, and that one does not let him kind of die slowly and humanely. That's kind of where we are in Gaza because there are no medical supplies. There barely any medical supplies. A lot of people die here. There are injuries of people that could, in the West, by the Western standards, could be saved. But here they cannot be saved because they have to go on a priority list, which is really, really heartbreaking.
If there is a full-scale invasion of Rafah, as Prime Minister Netanyahu has indicated there will be, what do you fear may happen?
Disaster, absolute disaster. Yesterday night, actually, or yesterday evening, I went and drove into Al-Mawasi area west of Khan Yunis. I wish if I could share these pictures with you. Literally all the way to the horizon, tents everywhere. Any direction you look, you see hundreds, actually thousands and thousands and thousands of tents everywhere, with families left stranded without water, without proper shelter. And Piers, let me kind of tell you how reality really is on the ground in these camps. A lot of people in the West, in America, like where I come from, think that when Israel says, we've evacuated Eastern Rafah, the first thing that comes to mind, you give them warnings and you send them, air-conditioned buses, they board the buses and they go into these evacuation areas in Al-Mawasi. And by the time you get there, you have these beautiful tents lined up with sanitary facilities waiting for you. That's not true. I mean, what we had to run from our safe house that's no longer safe, literally under the bombardment of the Israeli army. We just gathered our stuff and ran out of this house, which is a typical Palestinian experience. We did it twice. Our presence and our stay here in Gaza, the Palestinians have done it more than 7 or 8 times in the past 7 months. And when they get to Al-Mawasi, it's a desert. It's really a sandy land, empty land, where people carry their belongings on the back of a car or a truck or a donkey. They just dump it there.
So right now, if you live in Khan Yunis, you have to walk about 1.5 to 2 miles just to get where you can fill up jugs of water, clean drinking water. And that's just water. That's not even food. So a lot of people might be thinking, oh, they give them time to evacuate. Okay, they can just get in buses and go to clean tents or whatever. Like, no, that's not the case. Just like this man said, most of the people that evacuated from central Gaza, Khan Yunis, and went down to Rafah, they actually had to go by foot. And a lot of these times there were Israeli soldiers lined up surrounding them, shooting them indiscriminately while they were walking for no reason. This happened on multiple different occasions when they told them, or they would bomb the safe routes that they told them to walk on because they were like, oh, it's safe, walk here, and then they would just like indiscriminately bomb it. So, you know, when we talk about, okay, the Israeli government gives them warning before they bomb it, sure, but there's a lot of context you're missing around that, and that's just not fair, you know?
And they start figuring out what's next. First, no water. You don't have tents because the supplies are not allowed in. And so they have to figure out how to create a shelter. And the problem is, if to buy a tent in Gaza today costs more than $1,000 to $2,000 because you can't find it. You know, no organization gives you tent. There are some in the past, but currently none. So you go with your family of 5, 6, 10 children and your wife in the middle of absolutely nowhere. You don't know where the water is. And I've seen it with my own eyes, and I'm more than happy to shake. I actually see it on our Instagram page on Fleisher Scientific that we posted or will be posted very soon. What people do, they dig a hole in the ground because they are near the beach. So the water table is very shallow, just about 2 meters deep, and then water comes out. So people collect that water and use it for drinking, washing, for everything. But the water is brown. It's brackish water. And for them to go get fresh water, they have sometimes to walk to 2 to 3 miles to find it. And if they find it, sometimes they have to pay for it. And it's very expensive. So things have gone 10 and 15 times in price, almost in everything in Gaza. Just to give you a simple example. For my team, for us to fill our cars with gasoline, with gas, 1 gallon of gas in Gaza cost $100. This is what we pay as an organization, $100 per gallon of gas. Apply this to everything. I don't like to describe this as a war. I like to describe it as madness, absolute madness.
Also, not to mention, so you see all of those GoFundMes that go around, right, where people are posting their GoFundMes or people's families in Gaza, and they're like, GoFundMe to get them out, blah, blah, blah. So you actually have no way of sending money into Gaza. The only way you can send money into Gaza is through Bitcoin. And if you do that, you run the risk of getting flagged by the American government for helping fund Hamas, which they have aligned as a terrorist organization. So a lot of these GoFundMes where you see people fundraising money for people in Gaza, usually it's somebody that is outside of Gaza that actually, you know, set up the GoFundMe. But also once they reach their goals, it's very hard to get them to the people in Gaza, like on the ground. It's extremely hard because the amount of barricades that the Israeli government has put up has made it damn near impossible to make it happen. It's like damn near impossible to make it happen.
And have you seen any evidence of Hamas either in Rafah or Khan Yunis?
I hope you believe me if I tell you I haven't even seen a police in Gaza, which is also another shocking experience because you would expect in such circumstances, in the absence of police,
Leave it to Piers to get a once-in-a-lifetime interview and ask the interviewee, who's a doctor, if he's seen Hamas. I knew he was going to do something that was going to piss me off eventually.
That you will see chaos. People are, killing each other, but the crime rate in Gaza remains very low because people support each other and they kind of go through this tough experience together. We've been in Gaza. This is our second mission, so several weeks now in Gaza. Personally, this is my second week. I have not seen, and none of my medical team members have seen any form of militants either at the hospital or otherwise. All what we receive at the hospital are injured and killed civilians. And when I say civilians, I like to stress that they are families, a mother, a father, their children, injuries. One of the latest cases that we had to work on, a young man in his 20s, came in still breathing, but in a state of a shock. So the team tried to resuscitate him, but then they failed, and they decided to actually crack his chest open. And again, I'm sorry about the graphic description of the situation. And then they could not actually save him. So heartbreaking absolutely horrific. I mean, honestly, I've seen so many things in my life. I was there looking. After 5 minutes, I personally felt dizzy. I just could not handle it.
Can I ask let me ask you,
Yeah.
Dr. Nasser, just finally, I mean, it takes a lot of courage.
Just finally, let me ask you, Doctor, do you condemn Hamas? I will literally lose my shit if we ask that question.
To go to somewhere like that, knowing what may be coming imminently. What is it that motivates you to risk your own life to be there?
I think we are at unprecedented time in history, Piers. And every member of my team would like to be part of it. That's something we will talk to our children and grandchildren about what happened in Gaza. It feels like a day of judgment to many. For the Palestinians, it's an endless suffering for absolutely a crime that they have not committed. 1.5 million people, almost 2.2 million people are put in inhumane conditions like no other maybe the history has ever seen and will ever see. And this madness has to stop.
Dr. Nasser, thank you very much indeed for taking the time from that incredibly busy environment you're operating in. I really do appreciate it. I want to wish you and your team all the very best and stay as safe as you can, given how dangerous it clearly is. But I thank you on behalf of everyone watching this for the service that you're doing for the people there.
Surprisingly, Piers was very manageable in this interview, but also I think it's hard to argue about whether you condemn Hamas or not when you're talking to a fucking doctor that's literally in Gaza, you know?
Thank you, Piers.
Well, to debate, I'm joined from New York by Professor Norman Finkelstein, political scientist and pro-Palestine activist, and from Efrat in the West Bank by Yishai Fleisher, the spokesman for the Jewish community of Hebron, and Minister Ben Gvir's former advisor for international affairs.
This man was Ben Gvir's national advisor? Ben Gvir is a psychopath.
Well, welcome to both of you. Dr. Finkelstein, let me start with you, if I may. We are on the verge, it seems, of an inevitable full-scale invasion of Rafah. Prime Minister Netanyahu has made that clear.
Why is he standing like that? He's giving antagonizing energy and he hasn't even said a word. I don't know why. I just feel like he's about to punch the air. And I'm not saying this because I'm clearly biased towards whatever shit view he has. He just seems very antagonizing. And I don't know why. Maybe it's his aura.
It's also clear that America, Israel's biggest and most powerful ally,
the only person that stood in a Pierce interview was Crackhead Barney. And we all know how that interview went.
Is extremely concerned about this. In fact, Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said not only does he think it's a big mistake for Israel to do this, but he believes that the war on Hamas is not really working, that Hamas is now regrouping in the north anyway. And so on every level, from the American assessment, this is something that shouldn't be happening. What's your response?
Well, I can't speak to the military situation because I have no professional knowledge of it. I can't speak to the humanitarian situation. The International Crisis Group, a very respected mainstream organization, put out a report about 3 weeks ago in which it says there is no middle ground. If there is an invasion of Rafah, there's going to be mass hunger, mass starvation in at least northern Gaza and perhaps elsewhere. And they were emphatic about the fact that you have to make a choice, either suspend the invasion or accept that you're going to cost the lives of thousands and perhaps more than thousands.
I just think Norm speaks very slowly. I love Norm. I love everything he has to say, but it's you gotta be patient, especially if you're an ADHD person. You know, you just gotta be patient.
Thousands of civilians in Gaza. The second point I would make is that, at least as of the last few days, the Undersecretary for Humanitarian Affairs, Martin Griffiths, has said that no aid is coming through to Gaza anymore, from that Rafah has been shut down, that Kerem Shalom has been shut down, and that Gaza is now in a position where it was a few weeks ago when Israel was effectively not omitting any humanitarian aid to Gaza. So at a humanitarian level, should there be a is a full scale. There is an invasion right now, and large numbers of people, I guess the current estimate is 300,000. Large numbers of people have been displaced. Displaced where is unclear because it's unclear where to go. But if there's a full-scale invasion touching the core of the Rafah refugee population, then one can, at least according to the International Crisis Group, expect mega deaths.
Yishai Fleisher, I watched Dr. Phil's interview with Prime Minister Netanyahu last night, and he was emphatic, Netanyahu, that there would be no stopping Israel going into Rafah and that they had to do this because Hamas had to be eliminated. But it would seem from American intelligence that Hamas is already regrouping in the north of Gaza, which surely should be of significant concern to Israel, shouldn't it? If the strategy is simply not working and Hamas is regrouping now in areas that were thought to have been places where Hamas had been removed, doesn't that...
You just listen to this doctor give you harrowing stories of what he is seeing, and the first thing you could come up with asking this Zayu psycho is, hey, what do you think about Hamas regrouping in northern Gaza? Can you at least ask a question that has some sort of substance, for fuck's sake?
Suggest this military strategy is not working.
First thing, Pierce, I want to thank you so much for having me on the show. And I also want to use this opportunity to wish Israel a happy 76th Independence Day. Tonight we celebrate that. Israel is the most exciting project of the Jewish people in 2,000 years. So this is a big deal for us. Today was Memorial Day. Now it's Independence Day.
Today is the 76th year memorial of Nakba, when they basically murdered and displaced hundreds and thousands of people in order to get land because they believe that they deserve that land for whatever godforsaken reason. So let's not do that.
And so, you know, I really appreciate the chance to speak about these things with you today on your important show. With regarding to Gaza and the Hamas war, okay, so we're going to have to fight them in Rafah, and if we have to fight them in the north, we'll do that as well. We're in a war. We're in a war. We're not here to just give it up right now just because it's not working here or there.
Why is he smiling when he says he's in a war? What is so funny about that? He's like looking in the camera. He's like, we're in a war. We're in a war. That's just what it is. We're in a war. This is like the third Zayu that has laughed and smiled at the prospect of the fact that they're in a war, as if they're elated to wipe out Gaza. And I'm not saying this because I have bias. I'm saying this because I've actually seen it myself.
We're at a war with people who have dug tunnels 15 stories deep, people who want to destroy the state of Israel. That is their charter. It's a religious charter. They say that they want to get rid of all of Israel, starting with Gaza. And if we have to pivot to the north, we'll do that. The Jewish people are used to conflict. We've been through a lot of conflicts throughout our history, 3,000 years of conflicts, but we're still here. So if we have to go north, we'll go north. It doesn't, what follows from your question is not that we should just give up and not attack in the south. It just means that we'll have to move on our attack north. And we're going to deal with this thing because we have no other option. And I want to remind you, Pierce, that it's a proxy war as well. If we lose this thing, we're going to lose it to the Iranians, who just declared that they have a nuclear bomb. We have to fight this. We have to prosecute this war to the end and send a signal to.
Listen, I don't like the Iranian government. I highly doubt that the Iranian government has any nuclear bombs, if one. And outside of that, Israel has dozens of nuclear bombs. So if we're going to put nukes at a point of, you know, scare and discussion, why don't we talk about your favorite ally, America, that has more nukes? Well, actually, Russia has the most nukes. But, you know, you want to talk about Iran having one nuke, then you need to talk about Russia and America too, because Russia isn't necessarily your fan either, my guy.
To the Middle East that we're not joking around.
Okay, let me play you Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, what he had to say on the weekend shows in America.
We're seeing parts of Gaza that Israel has cleared of Hamas, where Hamas is coming back, right, including in the north, including in Khan Yunis. As we look at Rafah, they may go in and have some initial success, but potentially at an incredibly high cost to civilians. but one that is not durable, one that's not sustainable.
What success has the Israeli military had so far? They don't know how many Hamas militants they've killed. They haven't brought home any hostages outside of the one pause that they had months ago. They've been relentlessly bombing and shooting their own hostages. Their own people hate their government to the point where they're literally fist fighting with Ben-Gvir in the streets. What success are we talking about? Like, what are we measuring the success that they've had? Because from where I'm looking at, it's been all a bunch of else. In their eyes, since they want to wipe out Gaza, sure, they've been doing a job at that. You know, they've been able to wipe out a lot of the infrastructure and kill a bunch of people and whatnot. But when you're talking about being successful at taking out Hamas, their goal isn't even Hamas at this point. Their goal is to just occupy more land and take out the people who are indigenous to that land. It's literally that simple.
Sustainable. And they will be left holding the bag on an enduring insurgency because a lot of armed Hamas will be left, no matter what they do in Rafah. Or if they leave and get out of Gaza, as we believe they need to do, then you're going to have a vacuum, and a vacuum that's likely to be filled by chaos, by anarchy, and ultimately by Hamas again.
Now, Yishai Fleisher, the problem is America is...
That was one of the worst takes I've heard in my life. Bro, millions of people are about to starve right now, and you're talking about how Gaza is going to be taken over by anarchy? Are you fucking kidding me? He's got to be getting paid good.
As I said, America is Israel's biggest ally by far, also biggest supplier of military hardware, which President Biden's already said he's going to stop a lot of that going to Israel if they go into Rafah. But to have the Secretary of State of the United States expressing such concern about the military strategy, surely that has to concern you, doesn't it? Because ultimately, if you kill all these innocent civilians in the process of getting rid of Hamas, but you end up not getting rid of Hamas, that is a failed war, isn't it?
Okay, so first thing with regarding to civilians, we have to remember that civilian deaths is actually part of Hamas's strategy against us. They want Israel to kill a lot of civilians so that Piers Morgan can ask, hey, what's going on with the civilians? So that the Anthony Blinkens can give Israel a hard time. So that is in their interests. They are actually going against the Geneva Convention's stated laws that you're not supposed to put in civilians in front of...
There's literally no proof of this at all. He's just talking out of his ass. Like, there's no proof that Hamas actually does that.
But Israel is also killing. Israel is also killing thousands of civilians. You accept that?
Yeah, yes, we are, because we're in a war.
Right.
We're in a war, and we basically, it's like this, Piers. If we don't do it, then basically we are sending the war onto the next generation. We're just passing the buck. We're kicking the can down the road. It means that my children are going to have to prosecute the next war. We've already seen that. We've already had many wars with Gaza. This is like war number, like 5? So if we don't take care of this business, they're going to come stronger at us. They're going to declare victory. We can't have that. We can't have Iran be victorious in Gaza as it has been in Yemen, as it has been in Iraq, as it has.
Here's my issue with Zionists, and I'm gonna make this as plain and simple as I possibly can. Whenever we talk about, okay, there's Hamas, Gaza, Israel, and Zionism, right? You can talk about how Iran is funding Hamas. You can do that. But when the question at hand is civilian deaths and all you do is talk about Hamas and Iran, you've lost my attention. Because as much as I hate the Iranian government, that's not the point of the discussion. The point of the discussion is X amount of civilian deaths have happened based off of one event that happened 8 months ago. Sure, it was egregious, but when you look at the scope of everything that happened, not very surprising that the people ended up somehow fighting back within the open air, like, apartheid state that they've been living in, right? And for some reason, they always tie it back to, well, Iran. And it's like, okay, you can make a separate argument about how much Iran sucks, and surprisingly, I'll agree with you on that, because the Iranian government does suck. They're not a great government. But when that's your only talking point, oh, Hamas uses human shields, Iran, you're losing the attention of people because and also you make Americans not think that the Iranian government is that bad because you're using them as your boogeyman. And as much as I agree that Iran is a boogeyman towards its own people 100%. It's just not a good talking point when you're talking about the Israeli government, because you're pointing fingers at this one country and you're turning them to a boogeyman when the American people have been seeing that for years and years and years and years and years. Vietnam was our boogeyman. Afghanistan was our boogeyman. Iraq was our boogeyman. The American government has created boogeymans out of different governments that, quite frankly, didn't belong in that boogeyman category. Vietnam, because they were turning into communist, a communist party. Iraq and Afghanistan because of 9/11, even though Iraq and Afghanistan had absolutely nothing to do with 9/11. They said that, Afghanistan had a bunch of, weapons of mass destruction. They never found it. We spent 20 years in Afghanistan to take out the Taliban, just for the Taliban to regain all control and turn Afghanistan into a working shithole now. You know what I mean? It's just like this boogeyman narrative worked 20, 30 years ago when people did not have access to the internet, when things like TikTok didn't exist, when social media sites like Instagram and Twitter didn't exist, right? But now that we have access to things that are not media conglomerates that can only feed us one narrative that is paid and bought for by people that adhere to Zionist ideology, you cannot turn a country into a boogeyman and believe that it's going to work in your favor, because the American people see through that. And then when Iranian people say, hey, the Iranian government sucks, people won't listen to us because you've used our people, our suffering, as a ploy to try to prove that, Israel is the victim when you're not. Iran is the boogeyman. And although Iran is a boogeyman to certain extents, you're not helping anyone. You're really not helping anyone. Fight your own fights and bring up your own talking points. But since they don't have any talking points outside of Hamas uses human shields, we pulled out of that region in 2005. Israelis are surrounded by Muslims and they constantly want to fight us. Palestinians constantly teach their children that Israelis and Jews are terrible people. Yeah, outside of those talking points, you have nothing but Iran is a boogeyman. And yeah, you're going to start looking fucking stupid if you keep using that boogeyman, because no one's going to believe you.
Has been in South Lebanon. We can't have that. So this time, October 7th is an opportunity to clean house and to make sure this doesn't come back again. Now, people on the more right-wing part of the spectrum believe that Israel should actually hold on to Gaza and have minimally military presence there, if not more. Because if we just back out of there, what happens is the next Hamas or the next evolution of Hamas will take over. So yeah, Pierce, bottom line is it's a war and we got to fight it.
Right, Norman Finkelstein, Yishai Fleisher said this.
I wonder if I can briefly respond to that.
Yes, you can, yeah.
Thank you so much. I think there's a bit of a misnomer here by designating what Israel's aim is to simply impose a major military defeat on Hamas. I have no doubt that that's correct. However, I do believe that what you're describing, quoting Anthony Blinken, as a failed strategy is only half correct, because Israel has another goal. The goal is to finally solve the Gaza question for once and for all. As the other person said, there have been many high-tech Israeli massacres in Gaza. It's actually quite a large number, more than 5, but I won't bother with the figure. And the goal right now is not just to mow the lawn in Gaza, but to extirpate, pull out from the roots every blade of grass in Gaza. That is to say, to make Gaza unlivable. And in terms of that goal, which is separate and discrete from the goal of inflicting a military defeat on Hamas, that goal is coming close to achievement. They have made the north of Gaza and they have made central Gaza unlivable. Those landscapes can now be described as a howling wilderness. The only area of Gaza which is not physically unlivable, that is the only area that has not been completely reduced to rubble, the only area is Rafah. And so when Prime Minister Netanyahu says he wants to finish the job in Rafah, that, in my opinion, yes, it does include a component of trying to defeat Hamas. But the bigger goal, in my opinion, judging from what the Israelis have said, their bigger goal is to make Gaza an unlivable place. And so the people of Gaza, in the words of Israel's former head of the National Security Council, Giora Eiland, the only choice that will be left to the people of Gaza will be either to stay and starve or to leave.
You know, Lindsey Graham, the American senator, gave an interview also at the weekend. I want to play a clip from that, Norman, and come back to you for your response to this, because he raises an interesting...
So Norm will respond in a way where you will get schooled in the most respectful way possible, in a way where no one can really refute your points, in an educational way. He is so well versed in debating and just what he talks about. No one can debate as well as Norman. My only complaint is that he speaks way too slow. But outside of that, he's a great, phenomenal debater.
Point.
Well, why is it okay? Well, can I say this? Why is it okay for America to drop 2 nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end their existential threat war? Why was it okay for us to do that? I thought it was okay. To Israel, do whatever you have to do to survive as a Jewish state.
Senator, again, military officials say the technology has changed. But let me ask you about how all
these
of this
military officials that you're talking about
let me ask you something.
Full of crap.
I mean, strong words there. Now, I think it's been misinterpreted as him saying that he wants Israel to use nuclear weapons. He didn't say that. What he was saying was, if it was deemed morally acceptable, as many felt it was, albeit horrendous death toll, but to end the war morally defensible for America to deploy nuclear weapons in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, then why is it not morally defensible for Israel to do whatever it needs to do to eliminate the threat of Hamas, given that Hamas is on record after October the 7th as saying they wish to do the same thing again and again and again, and have a charter which, when it was first written, said their obligation was to get rid of all the Jews?
I think there are a couple of aspects to that question. The first aspect is I don't think there is a broad consensus outside the United States, leaving the U.S. apart. I don't think there is a broad consensus that it was morally acceptable to drop atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In particular, you could say that the Hiroshima question is debatable, but I don't believe anybody seriously argues that Nagasaki was morally defensible.
Can we not get too much into World War II? Let's talk about our situation now.
Yes,
we got some serious things to deal with right now.
That's fine.
Let's get to it.
Right, I'm trying to be.
Let's not get into academic mumbo jumbo. I understand, but let's get to it. The bottom line is that Israel is a tiny country. And if you look at the map, you'll see we're a tiny Jewish state within. That's right, but we got to get to it and not talk about Nagasaki or Hiroshima. What's the difference? The point is, we're a tiny Jewish state within the Arab Muslim world, and if we don't defend ourselves, then we're.
Did I not tell you guys he was going to use that talking point? You cannot weaponize the fact that you are surrounded by Muslims and Arabs when you deliberately chose that area to go to. Okay, you chose that area to go to. Don't cry about it. Don't show me a map about it. Quite frankly, you don't like Muslims and Arabs. You're scared of us. Go to Antarctica. Go to Antarctica. Free land, open space. You just got to deal with some scientists coming in and out doing some research studies about global warming. Outside of that, you're good to go. You're golden, boy. Go there if you're that scared of us.
An ethnic minority. We're an armed ethnic minority.
Let Norman Finkelstein respond, please.
Piers, you have to decide whether you're the moderator or he's the moderator.
No, I'm the moderator.
You asked me a question.
Norm said, listen, get your panel together. Norm said, if you don't make this man shut the fuck up, I'm leaving. I'm too sophisticated for this.
Be responsive to your question.
Yeah, I understand.
So now on the question of Israel and Gaza. Either you do or you don't accept the laws of war, what's called international humanitarian law. If you do accept the laws of war, then Israel has to abide by those laws of war. And the fundamental law of war is called the principle of distinction. You have to distinguish between targeting civilians and targeting combatants. So I don't believe Lindsey Graham is correct, except if in his opinion, he said Israel has to do what it has to do. That's his essential argument. But that means, as I understand him, Israel doesn't have any obligation to obey the laws of war.
Well, okay. Let me just be fair. Let me just say on that, Norman. On that, just to clarify, he wasn't advocating that Israel should break international law. He didn't say that. And I would throw it back at you, I guess, this point, which is, do you now, or maybe you have always done, but do you accept that Hamas broke international law, given that it was the governing body of Gaza at the time, that when it committed the act of atrocity with its terror attack on October the 7th, that was a breach of international law?
I can never tell if Piers is a Zionist or not, because he's asked Finkelstein this question in many different forms. He asked Finkelstein to condemn Hamas. He asked him if he thinks Hamas was justified. And every single time, Norman has responded to him in the way in which he believes is appropriate. But he keeps badgering on the same question, but he keeps twisting and turning it in different ways.
Law. You accept that?
I would say there are two aspects to that question. Under international law, there is no law on preventing people living under an occupation from resisting that occupation using armed force. Under international law,
Pierce, for God's sake,
it is
he's
neutral.
on record stating that he was jovial at that.
Yishai, I will let you respond. Just let him finish the point. I'll come to you.
All right, let's get to it. All right.
However, in the course of its armed resistance to the illegal Israeli occupation of Gaza, it broke the laws of war to the extent that it targeted civilians, and the evidence thus far indicates that massive atrocities occurred on October 7th. However, we have to distinguish that, which was clearly a breach of international law, from the right of a people under occupation to use armed force to end the occupation.
Okay, let me go to Yishai Fleisher. I mean, on that point, do you agree with Norman Finkelstein's assessment of what happened there?
First thing, October 7th was a horrific massacre. There's no international law that's going to back that. But we know, and you had this on your show, we know that Norman Finkelstein celebrated the murder of Jews. He's on record. You tested him. You saw that he was not telling you the whole truth. You know, he said, I, for one, will never begrudge. It warms every fiber of my soul. The scenes of Gaza smiling children as the arrogant Jewish supremacist oppressors have finally been humbled. So forget international law. He's happy that Jews were murdered. You know, that there was some soldiers that they were murdered. Their male members were cut off and put in their mouth. And then the terrorists took out the phones and sent pictures of that to their mothers. All right, what are we talking about here? Let's get back to common sense. We have a war here against an intractable enemy that wants to destroy Israel. Even President Biden, who's not a big fan of this war,
he has to read off of a piece of paper to be able to make his arguments. You're not that convincing to me if you have to go into a debate reading off of a piece of paper. Like, I'm sorry. You could at least memorize it.
Already said that Israel has not done atrocities, is not committing a genocide. That's already passé. Even Norman Finkelstein.
Yeah, let's quote Joe Biden, the person that everyone looks up to and everyone listens to for factual based evidence and just talking points. Joe Biden literally said that 40 babies were beheaded, and then he recanted and he was like, actually, I don't know if they have been. I just trusted the Israeli government. So you want to talk about what Joe Biden says or doesn't say? He's literally flunking in every single swing state poll. He's slated to lose miserably. Democrats don't like Joe Biden. Republicans for damn sure don't like Joe Biden. It's just not it's not a strong talking point.
His beloved ICJ basically did not go into saying that Israel is doing atrocities. They kind of bunted and said, please be careful in the future. That's it. So now we're fighting an intractable enemy. As I said before, it's a proxy war as well. And it's not an occupation. Very sadly, my nation, Israel, in 2005 gave away land. I was there. I was there with Arabs. I was there with Arabs and Jews in Gaza in 2005 when my army came, the Israeli army came and took us out of there. The Arabs there begged us. I still remember their hands through the fences like this. They said, don't leave. You don't understand who's going to take over. Now, what Norman Finkelstein is going to tell you is that all day long Israel is committing atrocities. If you go to Telegram, you could see the videos of Hamas shooting civilians and women.
Source? What's his source? What's his source, chat? Just trust me, bro. Just trust me, bro. The Arabs were at my knees begging. He doesn't even have the common decency to call them Palestinians. He just says Arabs. God, there's so much to unpack here.
Yelling, you have destroyed our lives. You have destroyed our land. You have killed our children. Hamas is a cynical organization. Its leaders are billionaires. Its whole thing is to make Israel look bad. It has no care for its own civilians. It steals the food that comes there. There's been thousands of tons of food that has come there, okay?
No, babes, you made yourself look bad. It was not Hamas that made you guys look bad. It was literally you. You guys have shit propaganda. You have shit military tactics. You don't have any regard for human life. You made yourself look like shit. No one else but you. You literally had a spokesperson come on Piers last week and say, oh, we killed 14,000 Hamas militants, but we don't know how many civilians we've killed because we don't track that number. No one's making y'all look bad but yourselves, honestly. And I will say, with the amount of propaganda that the American military has spewed ever since I was a child, all the odds were in favor of Israel. Americans hate Arabs. They hate Muslims. They did back in 2001. The majority of Americans wanted us to invade Afghanistan and invade the Middle East. You know what I mean? Anti-Arab and Middle Eastern hate, as well as Muslim hate, rate was skyrocketing back in the 2000s. Y'all botched your PR so freaking badly. Y'all look stupid. Every card that could have been on your side was on your side. You have zero justification for what you're doing other than human shields, and the Arabs want us to invade them, which quite frankly, both of those justifications aren't even justifications. They're just blasphemy that you say just to justify it within yourself. I don't even know at this point. Maybe you're getting paid racks. I don't know. Maybe it's all of the above.
But they steal it. They keep it for themselves. So what are we talking about? Let's just get back to common sense. We have a terrorist organization. It's controlling a piece of land. We're fighting them, trying to minimize civilian casualties. But yeah, it is war. It is war, and we're fighting it. Yes, they're putting their children in front of our munitions on purpose. And that is a very sad situation, but we cannot stop prosecuting this war. For us, it's exit.
Right. How are they putting their own children in front of your air raids? Y'all sent 100 air raids in the past 24 hours. How do you want to convince me that people are putting their children in front of air raids?
Existential. We are a tiny ethnic minority in this region. You're
tiny in geographical size. You are enormously powerful, actually, in terms of military power and in terms of political power. And you see what happens. And you have as your number one ally the United States of America, which is the most powerful superpower in the world. In January this year, your former boss, Ben-Gvir, argued that the departure of Palestinians and re-establishment of Israeli settlements is a correct, just, moral and humane solution to this war. I mean, that cannot be right. Surely, I mean, the solution to long-term peace is not going to come down, surely, to Israel filling Gaza with Israelis, is it? I mean, that would surely cross a line which nobody would think could be remotely achievable in terms of a sustained peace.
This is a big question, Pierce, and a good one, an important one, which is really a much bigger question about how do we move forward. First thing is, we have a war with a jihad. We don't have a war with Arabs. We don't have a war with Palestinians. We have a war with jihadists. Jihadists, they control the landscape because they're very violent. Mostly they're violent against their own people. I know this firsthand from Hebron. I cannot tell you how many examples I have of Arabs that want to make peace and relations with Hebron. I have excellent relations with many Arabs in Hebron, and yet they are persecuted by the Palestinian Authority, in Gaza by Hamas. Why? Because they want to move forward in...
You know that one friend that tells you, I'm not racist towards black people, I have black friends. That's the energy that this guy is giving me. I don't hate Arabs. I have many friends that are Arab in Hebron. The Arabs are actually my friend. It's giving the white man saying, I'm not racist, I have black friends. It's giving that energy. I hope y'all see it for what it is.
Normalization with Israel. Israel wants to normalize in this region. At the end, we are not very different than the Arabs. We have a similar DNA, we have a similar language, we have a similar religion. We're the children of Abraham. And some people are...
No, let me just say this. They are not the same as the Palestinians that live there, because you want to guess what country has the highest rate of skin cancer? Drum roll, please. Israel! Babes, if you were actually Middle Eastern, do you think you would have gotten that much skin cancer? Why did Benjamin Netanyahu and Gal Gadot change their names after they moved to Israel? Because their names were so white and so European that they had to somehow fit into the ethnic minority that is Israel now. No, honey, yeah, y'all are not from that region. I'm sorry, I hate to tell you. I'm not even sorry, suck it. You're not from that region.
Recognizing that that's the way forward. That's the Abraham Accords. Okay, that's the UAE and Morocco, maybe even Saudi Arabia in the future, in the near future, I hope. We have a way forward, and the way forward is a way of peace. What is peace? A strong Israel on its land, on its ancestral homeland, surrounded by Arab states on their lands. And those states together working together to make the Abrahamic region successful and thriving. But there are elements that are jihadist elements. These elements want to undermine that. They want to destroy normalization. They're against Israel. They're also against moderate Arabs. They're against Christian Arabs, Arameans. When I speak to non-Jewish residents and citizens of Israel, like Druze, like Cherkessim, like Arameans, like Bedouins, like pro-Israel Muslims, they all say the same thing to me. You have to be strong against the jihad. You got to crush it, or else it's going to take over. It first and foremost crushes the average Arab, the average decent.
First of all, I want to meet whoever this Muslim Zionist, this person is that this guy is talking about, because I can guarantee you that person does not exist. He's talking out of his anecdotal ass. Second of all, I don't care what your friends have allegedly told you. Give me facts. Give me actual evidence. I don't care what your experience in Hebron has been. Just give me facts on why what you're saying is right. And so far, nothing he has given us has been a fact other than him holding a piece of paper with a global map on it. That's it. And even the context in which he spoke around the piece of paper that he showed was bullshit. So is this a bet? Like, Israel really needs to step up their spokespeople. They really suck.
The person who wants to normalize with Israel. So the answer is like this. Fight with the jihad. Be bad to the jihad so that you can be good to the good people. That's the way forward.
Okay.
It's not to be wishy-washy and to back up and to let them take over.
Let me go to Norman Finkelstein. Your response to that proposal?
I'm not sure what the proposal is. What I hear is a lot of statements that seem to be completely detached from reality, at least as I understand it. According to the other speaker, the people of Gaza were begging the Israelis to stay. According to the head of the National Security Council at the time, Giora Eiland, and this is March 2004, he described Gaza as, quote, a huge concentration camp. So I find it a little bit far-fetched to believe
read one Israeli?
that the
Please don't interrupt.
Have you read anybody else? Like
Yishai,
one guy. That's the guy. That's
Yishai, let him finish.
Over and over again.
Please let him finish.
Sorry.
I would just like to point out that throughout the whole entire bullshit spiel that this man was reading off of his piece of paper, Norm did not interrupt him once. Not once did Norm interrupt him. Not once. Even though all he was saying was BS. And now he just feels this sort of entitlement to just interrupt Norm as if he has the right to do so.
Sure.
So I find it a little bit far-fetched that the inmates of a concentration camp would be begging for the guards to stay in the camp. That to me is an unusual. It's an unusual scenario. Now, this talk about the people, Israelis reestablishing illegal settlements in the illegally occupied Gaza Strip. That to me, there is a problem there. I was reading an interview yesterday with an expert on the subject. Israel has deposited, as of now, there are about 37 million tons of destruction, about 37 million tons.
Just for context, if you put together all of the bombs that America dropped on Iraq, that's 5 years combined in 8 months. 5 years. Actually, it may have been more years now because that was a couple months ago. And it's a tiny strip of land. Like, it's not that big of a strip of land. You know what I mean? Just wild to think about.
In Gaza right now, which means it would take, according to this expert, it would take about 10 years to clear the rubble in Gaza before you can even begin.
Don't worry, we're going to clean up Gaza because we want it beautiful. We're going to make it beautiful again.
Okay.
Make Gaza beautiful again. That's the slogan. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of it.
Yeah, thank you very much. You'll probably ask the international community.
We live here. This is
the international community. Yeah.
Well, oh my God, shut up. Holy shit, let the guy speak. This guy's so annoying.
Actually, on the subject of living there, I did spend quite a lot of time between 1987 and 1993 in Al Khalil, which is sometimes called Hebron. And it's again rather far-fetched to believe.
Like 4,000 years.
Yeah. Right. Well, it's Al Khalil.
Okay, go ahead. Al Khalil is the Arabic name for it. It came about 1,400 years ago. It's been Hebron for 4,000 years. Jews have been living there for 3,700 years.
You see, you have a problem, sir. The problem is you want to discard what the international community has to say in the subject. Under
I don't have a problem.
law,
I am very plugged in. There's many people in the international community that are with us.
Shut up!
President Trump, who recognized the legality of Jewish presence in Judea and Samaria. Certainly in Hebron, we've been there for 3,500 years. I think somewhere in international law they could figure out our rights in this ancestral city.
The whole of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and Gaza, are occupied Palestinian territories. So under international law,
it's our ancestral land,
or I should say under the
and nothing is going to.
What is Piers doing right now? Like, is Piers picking his nose? Can you please moderate and do your job?
Stop us.
Under the International Criminal Court Rome statutes, sir, you're a war criminal because you are illegally settling in occupied Palestinian territory. You should be prosecuted under international law as a war criminal.
Well, many people disagree with that. Many legal scholars disagree with that. That is not the law. That is not the law. That's the law according to...
is he going to bring the map out again? Is it the map?
Finkelstein is a notorious distorter of fact.
Oh, no.
Work, not a serious...
Oh, no, he's not bringing out the map. He's bringing out his notes.
Honest historian, right? It's on your...
Oh, wow. Oh, no, he showed his paper to us so that we could see what's on it because he couldn't memorize it. Peabody brain.
Wikipedia page. So do me a favor. You're not going to tell me exactly what the law is. You're not even a lawyer. I'm a lawyer. And it happens to be that we have every right to live in our ancestral homeland. We won that land in defense of wars, which is an international law principle. We purchased the land, which is the simplest principle of free markets. We
truly going by the American playbook. What can I say? Yes, you purchased the lands from who? From the Brits. You didn't even purchase the land from the people. You purchased it from the Brits because they dumped it on you.
Arabs. The three religions all recognize the Jewish people as living in this land. If it's the Quran, the Christian New Testament, the Torah, they all recognize us as from this land.
But what nobody, Yishai, if I may jump in, what?
This man said, I'm a lawyer, but then cited the Bible and the Torah as his reasoning to why he legally is there and he legally purchased land. Like, you can go talk to evangelicals about what the Torah or the Bible says. I personally don't give a shit. Like, give me actual news sources, which is something that this guy just does not have, unfortunately.
What people are not accepting are the continuing attempts by Israelis to expand the settlements. Almost nobody I speak to thinks that is anything but a deeply inflammatory thing to be doing.
Can I remind you again, Pierce? Pierce, this is this little white thing.
You don't.
Here we go.
Okay, listen. Let me explain.
Ancestral
Hang on.
land, Pierce.
Let me explain. When I went to Jerusalem about 12 years ago and interviewed Prime Minister Netanyahu in Jerusalem, he showed me a very similar map that was hanging behind his desk. And he put his thumb on Israel and he put his hand on all the much larger Arab countries. I get it. But what it doesn't show is the reality that Israel is the most powerful country in that region in terms of its military and certainly in terms of its support from the United States. So this idea that it's a tiny, impoverished little part of land is a mischaracterization. But my question to you again, Yishai, is this.
Pierce, it's not a mischaracterization.
How does it help?
I never said impoverished.
Hang on, let me finish.
I never said that.
Let me ask you the question again.
Go ahead.
Which is, how do you justify the expansion of settlements, given that almost nobody I've spoken to on this show thinks that this is anything but inflammatory?
Oh my gosh, Pierce, for God's sakes. First thing, I never said the word impoverished. We're a powerful little country, great. But look what happens.
He implied that they're impoverished. He's like, look at this map. Look at how tiny we are. Look at all the jihads around us. Oh, poor us. He implied that they were impoverished. He didn't have to say it for us to understand the context in which he was speaking about. Listen, now he's just being derogatory. That's not even fair.
When we drop our guard for 1 minute, they cream us. Let's be real about what happened. We got creamed. And now we're fighting a war to fix that wrong that happened. Okay, that's number one. Number two is Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, so-called, is the heartland of the Jewish people. It's where we're from. Our whole DNA, everything, our language is based on these places. We're from these places. This was called the Jewish state 2,500 years ago by the Persian Empire. It's called Yehud Medinta, der Judenstaat, the Jewish state. This is the heart of our land. Yes, Israel has not formally annexed Judea and Samaria, but it holds on to it as territories.
Okay, you know what? This whole argument that 3,000 years ago this was your land, it's played out, babes. Like, you want to talk about what your people were doing 3,000 years ago? That's not how this works. Okay, you can't just go on land because 3,000 years ago at one point it was allegedly yours based on some fucking religious book that you believe in. Okay, you just can't. That's not how the world works. And the only reason why that's working for you right now is because America is funding everything you're doing. If America stopped being your fucking sugar daddy, y'all would flop big time.
500,000 Jews, so-called settlers like myself, who proudly live in the ancestral homeland. This is where we're from. This is where we're going to stay. Nothing is going to get us out. And no amount of international law mumbo-jumbo, no amount of academic gobbledygook is going to get rid of simple, plain history. And many people, including the Trump administration, recognized our rights. So we're talking about big America. You've said to me now on the show 3 times, you said to me, America's against this war. There's many Americas. Right now, it's a Biden America. Tomorrow, it might be a Trump America. A Trump America recognizes our right. So we're going to be patient, as we have been for 3,000 years. We're going to be strong, continue to build our 3rd Commonwealth, which is celebrating 76 years of independence today. Mazel tov, we say. And we're going to keep going. So don't give me this stuff about that we're not going to live in Hebron. Hebron is where we're from. Our forefathers and mothers are buried there. That's where we're going.
Before I go to Norman for a response to that, do you believe then that a natural extension of your logic is that you should also be entitled to the whole of Gaza going forward? Is that your belief? That actually that is all? Do you believe that is all Israeli land?
Absolutely, Pierce.
Okay, well
I
then
was one of the people.
Okay, but then
wait, let me finish. You asked a big question.
That's a massive
you asked
question.
a big question. It needs a real answer.
Piers has been terrible at moderating this debate because this man basically mansplained everyone. And I know that everyone else on this panel is a man, but this man didn't let anyone speak. I mean, Norm tried to speak for a little bit, didn't let Norm speak either. I mean, it's been incredibly insufferable.
Answer. That's right, and it's a fair question. You're right. And the answer is simple. 2005 disengagement was an awful mistake. We should control that land and govern it. It's a tiny piece of our tiny land. And of course, pro-Israel, non-jihadist Arabs and others, Palestinians, Muslims, whatever they want to be, that don't hate Israel should live there and be successful there.
But what right? Sorry, I'm sorry,
like
but listen,
Jews live in
Yishai, what right does Israel have to just take over Gaza, having obliterated it?
We're not taking it over. There was never a Palestine
you can defend
there.
Listen,
no.
You can defend yourself against a terror attack.
Pierce, there's never...
This surely is exactly the kind of occupation that Norman was talking about, only on a massively bigger scale. You're unashamed about it. You want to occupy Gaza.
You're not talking today to one of the liberal Jews. You're not talking to a government spokesman.
Clearly.
You're talking to one of the settlers.
Right.
I am talking to you about what we think is right. What we think makes sense also in terms of how to manage this region.
But the problem is,
if
Yishai,
you give up your land to the jihad, they attack you.
Yes, but the problem is you are sounding genocidal in the sense that you want to get rid of...
What?
Well, you want to
genocidal.
Oh my God, no! Pierce has never done this before. What?
Pierce, I respect you tremendously, so don't put silly words in my mouth.
Okay.
Really, truthfully, I watch you and I love your work and you open things up for a lot of people. Don't say silly things. That was very silly. I never said anything about genocide. Holding on to a piece of land, holding on to minorities. Every power in this world has minorities inside of it. Every country that's a big country has other minorities, other peoples inside of it. Did I say we should genocide the Arabs? We have a fight with the jihad. I said, and it's on tape, I hope you play it, I said that minorities that are non-jihadists, that are pro-Israel, are going to be successful in this land.
Yes, but
I want them to be successful, just like the Druze and the Cherkessim and the Armenians.
I would simply ask you,
genocide.
What
where
right,
would you even get that?
Yishai, what right does Israel have to occupy Gaza?
Genocide? Where would you even get that? Come on, man. I'm one of the cool ones. I just occupy and kill, and whoever agrees with me can stay.
After this, I don't think you have that right.
It is our historic homeland. Look it up in Wikipedia. You'll see what is the Jewish story in this place. It was ours 3,000.
Number one way to lose an argument, look it up on Wikipedia. Oh, God. Oh, my God. That was okay. You know what, Piers? Just look it up on Wikipedia. Literally every single academic institution tells you to not cite Wikipedia. Oh, my God. This guy's a mess.
Years ago, it was ours 2,000 years ago. Herod built whole cities in Gaza. One of the most ancient mosques in Gaza was before that.
Let me go
the ancient synagogue. It's our ancestral land.
Let me go to Norman. Norman, you've been waiting patiently. So your response to this, where Yishai has made it absolutely crystal clear, he believes that there should be a complete occupation of Gaza by Israel.
No, not an occupation, a sovereignty, an Israeli sovereignty.
Well,
it's the same thing.
And certainly first the military one at first step.
Norman.
I would say that he has one thing correct, and that is I agree with the Israeli Information Center for Human Rights in the Occupied Territories, the organization known as B'Tselem, which stated about a year ago that actually de facto there is only one state. There's only one state between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River, And that one state is based on the principle of Jewish supremacy. And what B'Tselem wrote in that report was that what B'Tselem appears, as I said, there are some Israelis who get confused and think the whole world is the West Bank and Gaza. I wish you would remind him that we're having a civil conversation here, and I have the right to respond.
Yes, you do. You do.
Thank you so much. So within that one state, namely between the Mediterranean and the Jordan, as B'Tselem said, it's effectively an apartheid state where the Jews have privileges and rights which are denied to Palestinians. In the case of Israel, they're second-class citizens. In the case of the West Bank, they have no rights whatsoever apart from those that they're given under international law. Let's say they don't have the essential right to vote. In the case of Gaza, since roughly, you can say 1991, they've been immured in effectively, as Giora Island put it, they've been immured in a concentration camp. And now the question is, how do you resolve that situation? And there are three possibilities. You can try to just subordinate that Palestinian population forever. That's one possibility. A second possibility is you can make Gaza and the West Bank uninhabitable and hope the people, by hook or by crook, leave. And the third possibility, as you put it, was genocide, or as Prime Minister Netanyahu put it,
and there's no possibilities that Arabs can live in Israel? Is that what you're telling me?
No, I think
Arabs cannot live in Israel?
What is he talking about, Arabs living in Israel? They don't even let anyone leave the Gaza Strip unless you have heaping amounts of money. And even then, they close the Rafah border. So what is he talking about, Arabs living in Israel? They don't even let Arabs leave their land.
That's it? Like the only answer is genocide? You can't have, we have 2 million Arab citizens in Israel. It's only genocide. It's the only option. That is just hot air.
Oh my God, please. Piers needs to put a muzzle on this guy. Like, he's really pissing me off. Norm never, ever interrupts this man, or never interrupted him. And all he's doing is just spewing. Like, please, like, let Norm talk.
It's just hot air. It's just, there's no truth of the matter. It's just TV bluster.
Okay, let Norman finish the point.
So if your other guest is saying that he would accept the slogan in South Africa, one person, one vote. If that's his position, I think that's a reasonable position, but he should be clear about that, since half the population between the Mediterranean and the Jordan is Palestinian Arab, and likely, given current birth rates, the majority between the Mediterranean and the Jordan will be Palestinian Arabs. Is your other guest stating, and this would be useful for your audience, is your other guest stating that he supports one person, one vote between the Mediterranean and the Jordan, and he accepts that the majority over time will be Palestinian Arab? Does he accept that?
Okay, Yishai?
Fabulous. Thank you very much. First thing, Norman, again, my name is Yishai. It's easy to remember. But in any case, I remember your name. Isn't that nice? I want to tell you that finally you got to something serious, because you now say there is an option other than genocide to actually become citizens of the state of Israel. Okay, we can talk about it. I wrote an article in the New York Times called A Settler's Vision for the Future of Israel. I outlined 5 alternatives.
A settler's vision in Israel? New York Times published that? Fuck's sake, man.
The two-state solution. I talked about pathway to citizenship. I talked about residency. I talked about Israeli Arabs, or so-called Palestinians, having a right to vote in the next door Palestinian state called Jordan, remaining here as residents, but actually voting in their country, Jordan, right next door. I laid out a lot of options, and those options are to...
Wait, so they don't have the right to vote in your own country, but they can vote for a country that's close to them? I'm sorry, I don't give a shit about Mexico politics. I want to vote for American politics. Why are you boasting about the fact that Arabs can't vote in Israeli politics, but can vote for Jordanian politics? That's so weird.
To be discussed,
absolutely. As I understand
but the point is, I was
it,
very happy. I was very happy, Norman, that you were able to reach a conclusion that there's an option other than genocide, and that Arabs can actually live within Israel. But I want to ask you, Norman, just remind me, how many Arab democracies are there in this world?
I don't ask for the right to vote in Canada. I'm an American citizen. I don't ask for the right to vote next door in elections in Canada. What I was asking you is,
we can discuss it. That's why I wrote an article with
slogan in South Africa of one person, one vote for the entire population between the Mediterranean and the Jordan. That seems to me the democratic solution.
That is
Do you
something
accept
to
that?
discuss, and that is at least, you know, I'll tell you the truth, Norman. That one I accept as being a reasonable proposal. I don't like that proposal, but I accept that at least being a starting point, as opposed to the farce that you said before, which is that there's only genocide.
Gentlemen, you know what?
Jewish people are going to live here, Pierce.
Given it's taken us about 45.
Samaria and Gaza,
listen,
the West Bank,
it's taken us 45 minutes, but we finally got to a place where there was at least a tiny fragment of agreement, which seems to me a sensible place to leave this debate. But thank you both very much indeed for, as always, giving both sides in a strident way. And I think the viewers will learn a lot from that. And I appreciate you both joining me. Thank you.
My recap of this debate. Piers did a terrible job at moderating. That was not an equal and fair debate. The Israeli man did not let Norm speak in peace. There was not a single point where Norm could respond without him jumping in on some mumbo jumbo shit, which was really annoying. And number 3, I honestly think Piers did a huge dishonor to the doctor that he brought on the first 10 minutes of this video, because he brought on a doctor that literally went over all of the atrocities that he saw firsthand, and then he allowed a far-right fascist settler to spew a bunch of propaganda, genocidal freak nonsense. I think it was great because it highlighted how genocidally freaky these people can be. Like, they're literally genocidal freaks, especially the far-right people. And the fact that he was the advisor to Ben-Gvir does not surprise me at all. But also, it's like, you have to push back at some points. You have to push back. You have to allow people to speak. You have to allow people to make their points. So I don't know. I didn't really like this one, but that's just my opinion. Thank you so much for watching my YouTube channel. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this, and we'll be back.